Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
Luke Cunningham.
Hi there, how are you today?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, can you tell me about your book?
Sure. My book, Leo, Inventor Extraordinaire, is about a 13-year-old boy genius he's a lifer at this school called the Academy of Florence. Lifer meaning he is one of the kids who has been there since essentially the day he was born, and doesn't really know about his family. And there's very few other students who are like him, who are essentially living there year round. But he is a genius level artist, architect, engineer, scientist. Unfortunately, he tends to forget one or two key details, and some of those devices go awry. And then, I'm not ruining anything, eventually he finds out that he is heir to the world's coolest toy company. And he is going to use his genius level competencies and all those different subjects to try and salvage that company, and also to find out what happened to his family and the reason that he has been a lifer at the Academy of Florence. The hook is that it is all based on the life of Leonardo da Vinci, who really was abandoned until he was 13 years old, and probably was the most competent at the most things in human history.
Oh my goodness. So I just finished reading the book, and I love learning
awesome.
I love learning about artist Leonardo da Vinci, and I totally did not notice that.
Oh.
I don't know how I did not notice that, but now that you just said it, it is so obvious.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. I mean, here's the thing that that was the jumping off point of the book, and the reason that I really wanted to write this book is, like 8 or 9 years ago, I went to see a Da Vinci exhibition in Los Angeles, and they were like, at one point in the exhibition, they were like, and here is a model of the 500-pound wooden robot lion that Da Vinci built that really worked. It would take 3 steps forward and would display a bouquet of lilies because he made it for the King of France. So it would display the fleur-de-lis. Mm-hmm. And I was just dumbfounded that he was doing this 500 years ago. So I was imagining what would happen if you took that same brain and put it into essentially a kid who was born now, because the book is set in the very near future. And obviously that is why the Leo in my book, the book you just read, one of his pets is a 500-pound robot lion named Gemini.
That is awesome. So when you had that idea for it, how did you decide to translate it in the way that you did, having it be this toy company and all of this like corporate espionage involved?
Honestly, I feel like that is really the difficult thing that your generation is going to face. I mean, I'm 40, and I feel like my generation has been dealing with it, but it's something that I think your generation is really going to have to take over and combat, is the way that corporations have kind of interwoven with government and have justified doing some pretty terrible things. And it's going to take a monumental effort and a lot of ingenuity and a lot of innovation to, frankly, like combat that and win. I mean, that's the reason the MacGuffin, but like the device that turns the whole novel, is the star disk, which is a nuclear fusion reactor, which has kind of been the aspiration of science for the past 50 years. It's like, obviously we figured out nuclear fission. We figured out how to make a nuclear bomb. How do we recreate the reaction that happens in the sun that provides all of our energy? How do we manage to do that on Earth, preferably at room temperature, and in something where it's controllable? And that's something I imagine someone who had the brain like a winning lottery ticket, like Leonardo da Vinci did, if they decided to pursue that now, what would they make?
That is so cool. Yeah. So, kind of like piggybacking off of that, what sort of research did you have to do looking into like all of these inventions and all of these things in science?
I have a history degree, and I've just always loved history. So it was a little bit of a combination of kind of what the Renaissance pursued historically with, making beautiful things for the sake of making beautiful things, but also taking that and applying it and trying to make your community, your city, your country, and inevitably the world better, less cruel, and just trying to better things with yourself first, and then taking that out to a macro scale. In terms of like the future and future devices, I looked at a lot of tech and kind of tech companies, and Molly, I don't know what kind of student you are, but I'm assuming you're pretty bright. You're
Thank you.
operating this podcast already. Yeah, I mean, I imagine if you have listeners who are around the same age, they're pretty ambitious, and so I'm trying to get kids with your brains before they decide to do stuff like run a hedge fund or make Uber, something where it's just like, great, you can call a ride on demand, but also you've just like ruined the labor system in cities. So, like, I mean, I guess ultimately, and if you read the dedication of the book, it's about ethics and pursuing the betterment of yourself and your community, but doing so ethically. And a lot of it is kind of about ethical capitalism. So in a roundabout way, that is kind of the combination that I cobbled together in the book, is trying to synthesize the past and the present into what I would envision is a better future. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And like, yeah, I love that one of the recurring themes of the book is ethics in that way. And like every so often, for anyone who's listening who has not read it, there's you keep repeating the line, you're like, genius steals. And it's like, yeah, it does. And it's like testing the ethics of that and like how far it goes to, like, you can go to steal in that way.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. It's like, I guess I'm just trying to ride the line between talking about the book and then spoiling it. It's an old, I think it's an Oscar Wilde line of talent borrows, genius steals. And that is repeated throughout the narrative. And it's one of the things that Da Vinci does. Da Vinci borrowed from, I guess, I don't want to I'm likely going to get it wrong. I think his name was Brionte. He was he's considered to be the first Renaissance painter, because he started working in a lot of kind of labored geometric forms. Like he started doing all of the process beforehand of like preparing how to paint. And that was really like what Da Vinci excelled at, was putting together all the geometry necessary before. Obviously, he has a genius level understanding of how to capture the natural form, but he combined that with doing an exhaustive amount of work beforehand to make sure that he was capturing things accurately. But he was still working off of Verrocchio, who so he was apprenticed to Verrocchio. That was abbreviated to, in the book, Rocky. The character Rocky is based on Verrocchio, who ran a painting academy in Florence. And a lot of Da Vinci's early paintings are or actually a lot of Verrocchio's paintings are finished by Da Vinci. Like, he would get a commission, and like a lot of people, he would be like, hey, I'm going to do most of the basic setup, but y'all can finish this off. And the y'all was Da Vinci. So a lot of that stuff is, it's incredibly skilled. Da Vinci's dad actually came back for him when he was 13. And the reason Da Vinci ended up in Verrocchio's workshop is because Da Vinci painted a duke wanted someone to paint like a sigil on his shield. And they found, 14-year-old Leonardo da Vinci was probably the guy who's like, I'll do it for the least expensive price. And he painted a dragon that was so vivid that Da Vinci's dad was like, all right, well, I've got to find somebody to teach you or like kind of apprentice you as a painter. And he went and found Verrocchio, who is his own, genius level Renaissance painter. But they all kind of worked off of the Renaissance embraced humanity and humanism and trying to capture the natural form, a lot of which started with Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno. And then the painter that Da Vinci credits for a lot of the baseline of Renaissance humanist painting is Giotto.
Oh.
So when you're talking about talent borrows and genius steals, that is a little bit of what Da Vinci was stealing, was the style that Giotto really brought forward and kind of broke from the Byzantine style of painting.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, as we were already discussing here, the talent borrows, genius steals theme is in the book. There are some other ones that continue popping up, like the song Here Comes the Sun and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Please go.
Sorry. I love that song. When I was in college, I was on a rowing team, and rowing teams have coxswains. Do you know what a coxswain is? It's the person who steers the boat.
Ah.
So they're usually a little person. I don't mean, oh man, they're short. They're not like physically a little person. Okay. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And our coxswain was a guy named Danny Harrison. And Danny Harrison was the son of George Harrison from the Beatles, who sang that song. And that is the only Beatle I ever met, is George Harrison, when he came in for Parents' Weekend. And
that is the coolest thing ever.
Right? And he was a lovely guy. And I just love that song of Here Comes the Sun, and the idea that they're pursuing nuclear fusion, the reaction that happens in the sun. And also, I mean, the homonym of SUN and SON, because you're trying to find your son. He left the puzzles for his son.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So in the book, there are a whole bunch of puzzles and riddles, and there's so much mystery to it. Mm-hmm. How did you plot those out beforehand? Did you kind of like let yourself discover it as you were writing, or what did you do for that?
Oh, I exhaustively plotted that out beforehand. It's something I found. So I've worked as a TV writer. I wrote for Jimmy Fallon and a few other TV shows that you likely never watched because they were hastily canceled. But the process of what I have found is the process of writing really is the process of outlining and bullet pointing and knowing where the story is going to go before you sit down and really try and weave in the prose. Like the real work is bullet pointing everything out. So it's like, oh, here's going to be a turn. Here's where a twist is going to go. They're not going to be able to see this coming. But also you're kind of like building out characters and making sure that everything develops along the way.
Yeah. So you just said that you were a TV writer. How has that work influenced writing for a book? Because I know they're so different format-wise.
They are so different. So I was a late night writer. So I was writing monologue jokes for Jimmy Fallon in 2014, 15. And a joke is like a little machine. It's like two sentences with a setup and then a punchline. And, you only get a laugh when people don't see the punchline coming. Like you can't have, because otherwise it's like, there's no surprise to it. Like a laugh is an involuntary response of, something unexpected. So a book or like a screenplay is just a really, really big machine. And you have to have all the surprises and kind of, it's simultaneously much, much bigger and much more intricate. But what I learned writing for TV is just kind of how hard you have to work and how many repetitions you have to put in before you really get something fun, like something that works and it doesn't seem labored. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're reading something, you don't want to see the seams. You don't want to maybe I'm trying to figure out how to explain this properly. Like
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like at late night or working in a late night show, every day at 11 a.m., I had 4 pages of jokes due. So it was like 40 jokes. And I would have worked on those most of the night before. And then like from the time I got up, I was just working on that joke packet. And what I took and applied to writing this book was like that same process, that same kind of intensity of sitting down and being like, okay, I've got to bang out jokes for the next 25 minutes. I'm going to do nothing but write these jokes. And I'm just going to take my phone and throw it somewhere that I can't see it after I put an alarm on. And then we're just doing this. Like that's all I'm doing for the next 25 minutes. And in that way, you start to build your machine. Like every time you put 25 minutes in, you might have to ditch 60% of what you wrote during that 25 minutes. But that 40% that you retain, you just start building and building and building and stacking. And in a way, I think it connected to how things build with the Fibonacci sequence, in that you start out with kind of the one building block, and then you just start adding building blocks, and you're just kind of spiraling up off of those building blocks until eventually you just have something kind of bigger and more tangible to work with.
Yeah. And definitely, like, as I was reading this, I did not expect most of pretty much any of the twists in it. Like I was shocked the whole time. Like it was really interesting seeing the way that the things built though. Cause as I was reading it too, like towards the end, I was like, oh wait, this connected to this thing 4 chapters ago. And this character said this line. I think that was really cool.
Oh, thank you. Did you enjoy reading the book? You can say.
I loved it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really fun.
I cannot tell you how it's a really big risk because I essentially took like a year and a half of my life and was just like, all right, I'm not going to write jokes. I'm not going to do the thing that has kind of paid my rent and for my family and everything for the past 5 years. I'm going to try and do this other thing. And when my publisher was like, okay, I think the book's going to be about 400 pages. And I was like, I like a chill went down my back because I can remember being 13 years old and watching so many kids go into the library. And, a teacher would be like, you should read this book, or they would pick up a book or something and they would look at the back and go 270 pages, and throw it. And I was like, oh no, there's definitely going to be somebody who looks at this and goes 400 pages. What? So I was very concerned that it was not going to be a kind of like fun, zippy read. But every indication so far is people have read it much more quickly than they anticipated when they saw the original length. So I'm very thankful that you said you enjoyed the book.
Yeah, it was very much, it was like such a great adventure, like it really put you in the heads with the characters, like just boom, 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 onto the next thing, onto the next thing. And it was really cool. Yeah. The digital copy that I was reading, since it didn't have all of the like formatting like in a physical book, was 200 pages. And when I went on to Goodreads to put in my info, I about had a heart attack because I was like, wait, where did that come from?
So it is a oh man, that's really because I know people get the digital copies. I really wish they'd find a way to get you a physical copy, because then you get all the illustrations.
Oh, there's illustrations?
Oh man. All right. So if you now that you've finished, if you would like to read and see all the connections between the characters and the illustrations and Renaissance art, you can check out at leo.inventor.extraordinaire, and it'll kind of explain everything that connects to it. Like the cover of the book is Leo in the mech suit, and he's posed in the same Vitruvian Man pose. Do you know the Vitruvian Man?
Oh, yes.
You guarantee you would recognize it if you saw it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I follow the Instagram account. I guess I just didn't look through it and did not connect two and two together that those were illustrations from the book. I'll have to look more closely this time when I look back at it.
That's my 14th birthday. You're going to see Bumpa for the first time in a year. Your head's somewhere else. But yeah, by the time you're on a semester abroad, sophomore year at Cornell, you're going to be like, you'll be like, I see all these. I've seen these drawings before. This makes sense.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna go through and check those out. So, so the book is filled with drawings, which I'm just now learning. When you were writing it, like, did you picture it with the drawings, or was that an after effect?
Oh no, I was working with the drawings, like, and kind of targeting toward a lot of the illustrations and kind of building towards things that, I mean, honestly, Molly, my ideal is that, like you and a bunch of your friends who are going to the Art Institute of Chicago on a field trip sometime in the next year and a half, and you're looking at things and you're like, oh, I remember reading in this guy's book how to interpret this art, like to see this art and see the value in how this was a departure from the Byzantine style of art, how this was like a revolution in storytelling, and how like important this was to human culture, and hopefully understanding that we can do that whole thing again. Like we can really like have that same investment in making things better. And a lot of that starts with just like really wanting to make things as making beautiful things for the sake of making beautiful things.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that this book has so much in it about, like, as you were saying earlier, about like how you can make ethical capitalism, and it doesn't always just have to be this company's better than this one, and it's always trying to get people to buy it, and like how they were going through his old journals and like finding all that stuff. And I think that's a really great message.
Yeah, I mean, if like I grew up right outside Philadelphia, and I grew up in this very working class community called Upper Darby, and it was a place where it seemed like they were the story that people were telling themselves were the best days of Upper Darby have passed. Like, you should have seen this place 50 years ago. And the reason that things had passed, that Upper Darby had been passed by, is because a lot of the good jobs were gone. And to me, that's part of what Leo's father did when he built the company where he did. He built it in this forgotten city. He built it in this city that people said its best days had long since passed. And that doesn't have to be true. And one of the first things that Peter Wynn did was he made sure that he provided good jobs that provided people with like dignity and work that they wanted to do, and they were engaged. And a whole city was built around this tower, this beaming tower built over an old quarry. And the rival company is, I mean, factually is built to employ as few humans as possible. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of the ethical capitalism part of the story. By the way, this is the deepest dive we've gone into the philosophy of ethical capitalism with anyone who has interviewed me so far in the book. And it's, of course, it's you. Yep. So great. No, I appreciate the deep dive.
Amazing. I love to see it. It's great.
All right.
So do you have this is kind of very much a pivot from what we were just talking about, but do you have any advice for young writers?
Yeah, do the work. You wouldn't believe how many people say they're writers or they're pursuing writing and then don't do the work. And it's not necessarily because they're lazy. It's because the inertia of making your mind work and start writing things down is really hard. Mm-hmm. But and the piece of advice that I took from another writer, which was like literally take your phone, throw it, shut off your Wi-Fi connection, and it's just 25 minutes. Just build your machine 25 minutes at a time. The book where I read that and I found it so beneficial is a book called Writing Movies for Fun and Profit by Tom Lennon and Ben Garant. They are two comedians they used to be in an MTV show called The State. And then they wrote the whole Night at the Museum franchise. They've written a ton of, but they talk about how difficult the process of writing is if you're completely unwilling to get over the inertia of not writing. And man, if you're a writer, nothing feels better than not writing. So it's really, it's hard to do that. And for young writers, I mean, that would be my number one suggestion is like, just get it down on paper. Get your first draft down. No one writes a lights out first draft. No one. And so get the first draft down and then you can start to make it better. It's like, I mean, it's again, the illustrations part of it, like one of the final illustrations in the book is Leo in the final battle, and he's wearing the mech suit with the lion helmet, and he is posed in the exact same pose as Michelangelo's famous statue of David. You've likely seen David, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, there's an incredible story just behind that statue, like starting with the fact that Michelangelo is a full-on weirdo. But there was like a giant block of marble that had been in the center of Florence for decades. And Michelangelo was finally like, I'm going to carve that. I'm going to carve that into the most beautiful statue anyone's ever seen. And I feel like writing is a lot like that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I thought like, well, I think I'm done. And if it had been a statue, people would have been like, this looks like a Minecraft character. I don't know. What are you doing right now? Like, this is, you need to continue to chisel away at this until you've made something that is digestible. And for a lot of writers, like, I think that's what you need to do is like, you just continue to chip away and chip away and chip away at the kind of block of marble that is your original idea until you make something. And obviously, I do not want to indicate in any way that my book is as beautiful as Michelangelo's David, but you have to make something that people can like look at and understand what's going on.
Yeah, and as I also write a lot, and everything that I've found too is like sometimes you can make it too much, like I'm wording this very oddly. Sometimes you can make it relate to just you so much that it can
Yes.
be hard for other people to actually know what you're saying.
So when I was a kid, when I was actually your age, when I was in middle school, I used to wear red all the time. I would only wear like red. My starter jacket was red. My Umbros were red. These are things that were very trendy in 1994.
Ah,
And everybody in my neighborhood called me Red Delicious. And one of the first things, because I would only wear red, and one of the first scripts that my writing partner and I sold was a script called Red Delicious. It was like the Wonder Years, except it was set in Philadelphia in the mid 90s. And ultimately, that was one of the notes we got is they were like, this script is so, like Fox, the Fox network that bought it was like, we think the script is funny and it's a fun read, but however, we feel like it's almost too personal. Like we're not
yeah.
sure that ultimately you want to have a show that's like The Big Bang Theory, which just everybody in America can tune in and watch on Monday nights and kind of laugh and get the characters and the jokes. And they felt like this was going to be a little bit too niche. So I completely get what you're saying. What have you written that you're like, oh, this is too niche?
Oh, well, that's been so many things. I've tried with friends before to like write scripts and stuff, and there's especially one in particular that we're like, oh yeah, this is going to be about our time at this theater we were at together, and we had some genuinely funny parts in it, but it would not have made sense to a single person that did not go to that theater at that very specific time.
Okay.
And, like, it's something really that can be hard to avoid in certain ways.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I'm immediately gravitating to Good Boys and Eighth Grade and just the movies that have been made for, like, about your demographic in the past few years. Mm-hmm. And just, like, Eighth Grade was written by a guy who was not out of eighth grade that long ago. I mean, Bo Burnham, is he 30 yet? He's probably
no idea.
But like the Good Boys, have you seen Good Boys?
I have not actually.
Okay. Good Boys is not Good Boys, I think is R-rated. So maybe
I've heard of that one. No, I didn't watch that.
Okay. But yeah, they're both very funny movies, but I think it's like it's difficult to write about something. It's difficult to write for a broad audience when you're not really a broad audience yet. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I'm not 13 years old. I was just trying to get back into the mindset of Red Delicious as I was writing this book and like trying to get in the mind of like a 13-year-old kind of ostracized kid in the form of Leo. So like when you're writing, you probably have a far better like nuance of what it's like to be a 13-year-old and 14-year-old, obviously now for a week, than anyone else who is trying to write that demo. But you also have to write for a very broad audience. Yeah. Like if all of a sudden entertainment was like, hey, all we want right now is what 14-year-olds in Hoffman Estates, Illinois are thinking, you would just be selling script after script after script.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That would be very nice. Yeah. Well, also like it shows, like, I don't know if you've seen the show Pen 15, but
I have.
It's so good. But those are two fully grown women playing their middle school selves, and they do it so well. I felt so called out by that show. But like it really doesn't always matter what age the person writing it as, like what demographic, but you still need to be able to have the nuance of that demographic.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, like I was writing stuff when I was 22, 23 years old, and the the only thing that is better now is just an extra 17 years of life experience and the accrual of wisdom. I guess that's ultimately like, that's the difference between, a lot of people don't understand the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I certainly didn't understand the difference at like 22 years old. I was like, I do great on standardized tests. I graduated from college. What are we doing here? I'm very bright. Like, let me in. And then there is a bit of an accrual of wisdom where you just kind of learn from life experience. Like, I was a teacher. My first job out of college, I was a teacher for a few years. And I just remember teaching sophomores and juniors and seniors in high school. And I might have been, I was like 4 or 5 years older than the seniors. And thinking to myself after a year or two of doing it, like, I don't have enough life experience that I can impart any of these great books at the level that someone should impart these great books to people who really want to read them, that really want to digest them. And so ultimately, like, that's why I ended up not being a teacher anymore, because I was like, I feel like I'm doing these kids a little bit of a disservice by being like someone who's barely older than them and trying to teach them about like Gatsby.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were a teacher, do you think that like having that happen, then now down the line writing Leo, do you think that that influenced you at all and like helped you get a better grasp on teenagers and middle school kids?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the hardest things to do when you're a teacher is you learn the process of going bell to bell, which is like the second the bell rings, you've got to keep people engaged. Like, you have to make sure that your class is something that they enjoy. I enjoyed the process of being a teacher, and I felt like I had reviews and stuff. Like, the kids I taught really enjoyed my class, and ultimately I was just like, oh, this isn't something I should be doing right now, because I felt like I didn't have enough accrued wisdom to be doing it. Mm-hmm. But the actual engagement and keeping people essentially like making sure that it's fun, because like if you're really learning interesting things, it's fun.
Oh yeah.
So like one of the things I used to do is every week we would have so I was teaching history and I was teaching English, but my history class, every time that we would start class, there would be 5 minutes of current events, because I felt like this was like 2004, 2005. There wasn't a lot of engagement with current events with the kids in my class at the time. So it would start out and it would be like, all right, here are 3 current events that just happened. And then by Friday, we would have a current events quiz. And it would just be 5 questions that would be like based on whatever we had talked about for the first few minutes at the start of class every week. And so, like you would have all you had to do was be in class and pay attention a little bit, and you would be able to handle this current events quiz. But then at the end, I would also throw in a pit battle, which was if you took 2 people from history and you put them into a pit, like a 100 foot by 100 foot by 100 foot pit, who's walking out, So it'd be like Joan of Arc and I don't know who else Catherine the Great. And ultimately it'd be like probably, like you would have to reason out who would be walking out of the pit battle.
See, I've played that game before on a podcast.
Oh, you did?
But it was with geek characters. We call it Geektastic Cage Match, and we're like, okay, which one's going to get out?
Oh, okay. Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't think I invented the concept of pit battles, but it was definitely, it was just like a thing that you would just try and find little tricks to keep people engaged. And like for me, the process of writing this book, like that's the reason the chapters are so short. That's the reason the chapters, a lot of them try and end on something where a little bit of like a da-da, where you're just trying to keep people engaged in your story and make it fun and make their brain work in a fun way a little bit as they're going through and reading.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has really been an excellent interview. I've had a great time talking to you.
We're already done.
Oh,
right.
I just have one last question, and that is, what do you have coming up?
Oh, what do I have coming up? Well, I've got this TV series at Disney Plus that I'm hoping gets made. It's actually, we're talking about Good Boys. It's got the guy who plays Lucas in Good Boys attached. He would play a young Michael Strahan. So hopefully that gets made. Do you know who Michael Strahan is?
Vaguely. I'm blanking right now.
You probably know him as the guy in Good Morning America. He is a Hall of Fame NFL defensive end, but he grew up on a military base in Germany before he moved to America to play football. But when he was growing up in Germany, his family called him Bob. And it's not short for Robert. It stands for booty on back, because evidently he was really dragging a wagon. So he had a big old badonk, and his family called him Bob. And that is the premise of the show at Disney Plus. So that's what I'm working on. What are you working on?
Oh, wait, what?
What are you working on?
Oh, every time anyone ever asks me that, I totally just, my brain fritzes out. Well, working on doing this podcast.
Lemon blueberry cakes.
Yes, making cake. Auditions.
Oh, nice.
You know, that sort
what
of
are you
thing.
auditioning?
Music, doing that. Yeah.
Wait, you're auditioning for music, or are you auditioning?
Oh, no. These are two separate.
Okay.
I'm doing auditions for through my agent.
Okay.
And then, working on music with people. Like,
do you play an instrument?
I do not, but I write lyrics. So.
Okay. Who is your favorite musician?
Taylor Swift. Oh, yeah.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
She might be mine too.
She's amazing.
She is. No one has a higher batting average. It's
I know.
insane. So I have a 19-month-old son, and he now, every time I drive him to school in the morning, he goes, music. And so I was like, okay, great. We'll put some music on. Do you know who he wants to hear more than anyone else?
Taylor Swift. She's the greatest.
Of course he does. Of course he does. I drove him to Clover Park in Santa Monica this morning for his daycare pod, and all he wanted to listen to the entire way there, 4 times on repeat, was Delicate by Taylor Swift.
I have never related to anyone more than your 9-month-old son.
19-month-old.
Oh, 19-month-old son. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's pictures of him, I think, on the at Leo Inventor Extraordinaire Instagram page. The book is dedicated to him. His name is Finn. He's got a gorgeous mullet right now. We haven't cut his hair yet. Yeah. But you guys get together and talk about Swift in about 15 years. You guys will hang out and talk about T Swift.
I'll be here with my albums. If and when a second book comes out, I will, if you would like to be on the show again, I would be happy to have you talk about it.
I'd be thrilled. Hopefully it's 2 years. We're right back at this again.
Yay! I'll be here.
All right. Well, great talking with you, Molly. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Of course. For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm Luke Cunningham.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after. The end.
Sorry, I missed my cue at the end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.